It is now cheaper to file your I-130 online, but it still might not be worth the risk. In this video, we're going to determine whether it's better to file Form I-130 online or on paper. But definitely watch to the very end, where we are going to share a crazy example of how a tiny mistake can delay your green card for years. And if you're new to our channel, welcome. Despite being immigration lawyers, we're also an immigrant couple, so we designed this channel to help ambitious professional couples handle their own marriage green card without hiring a traditional lawyer, while avoiding all the mistakes we made. Our immigration journey was prolonged by quite a bit of time, so yours doesn't have to. Alright, if you're considering filing from I-130 online, you might want to watch this video first and then make a final decision. We're going to provide you with a crazy story we just learned about that really highlights the current issues with online filing. But before we get to it, it's important to explain our thought process on why paper filing might still be the better choice. That isn't to say that online filing is all bad. There are definitely some advantages to online filing. The first advantage relates to the USCIS filing fee increase that went into effect on April 1st, 2024. While Form I-130 used to cost $535, whether you filed it online or on paper, this is no longer the case. For on-paper filing, you will now be required to pay $675, and if you're filing it online, you will now be required to pay $625. Thus, there's a $50 difference between filing online or on paper. And with the fees having pretty significantly increased, any savings can be helpful. This bit of savings thus gives online filing a small advantage over filing on paper. The second advantage of online filing is convenience. It's convenient to submit all of your information online because this is a format we're all used to. There is no need to print hundreds of pages of your bona fide marriage evidence, which is obviously huge. Additionally, with online filing, you only need to type and everything is simply and easily inputted using just your device. Not only that, but filing your I-130 online is convenient because you will pretty much right away receive a receipt notice. Plus, the petitioner will right away have an online account with a linked I-130 form. It's convenient since if you were to file on paper, you would have to get an online access code in the mail first, which sometimes doesn't even come. And finally, the other advantage is that the online filing walks you through the form. In other words, you do receive some guidance as to where to include your evidence and what information to provide. The USCIS website prompts you along the way as you work through the form and designates the areas where you will include your different types of evidence. From there, the USCIS software takes care of the rest. This definitely simplifies the process and prevents you or your lawyer from having to assemble all of your evidence with your form in a way that is acceptable and presentable to the USCIS. However, knowing how to properly assemble your case is hugely advantageous in the long run, preparing you to respond to any request for evidence, helping you build upon your case for when you need to go through the removal of conditions and naturalization process of your marriage immigration, and preparing you for any interviews with the USCIS officers. Moreover, I-130 is just one form and should be filed online by those whose spouses are located overseas. When you're filing for an adjustment of status, meaning your spouse is inside the US, you need to file a ton of other forms on paper. Which, by the way, for a list of all the required forms and the latest filing fees, make sure to download our Where to Start mini course, which will give you a great idea of what goes into this process. But now let's talk about the advantages of filing the I-130 on paper. The first advantage is one that actually pairs really well with the step-by-step approach our marriage immigration method takes our member couples through to successfully prepare their applications. It is that you go through the official document line by line. And why is this an advantage? Well, first, because you're handling the data entry yourself, making sure there are no typos or potential software errors. Second, you are learning, understanding, and evaluating the form. This gives you greater insight into what the USCIS is asking for and better prepares you for this journey. And finally, you're not dependent on the USCIS tech. Why might this be an issue? Well, USCIS tech is notoriously problematic, and we've seen a ton of problems and errors, which means you should go through the form line by line either way, whether you're filed it online or not. So, if you're going to need to review the document for potential errors either way, then it makes more sense to fill it out on paper and do so right the first time around. But please share your thoughts on online or paper filing with us in the comments. You might have a personal experience that we've never encountered before, so others can learn from you as well. But that's not the only advantage you will receive when filing on paper. These next two advantages are huge, with the last one being particularly important. However, the next advantage is that by filing Form I-130 on paper, you prepare a complete application. What does that mean exactly? Couples come to us all the time and ask, so can I file my marriage adjustment online or do I do it on paper? paper. How does that work? Well, Form I-130 is currently the only form that can be filed online. That means that 80% or more of your packet will still be prepared on paper. By filing Form I-130 online, you're fracturing your application. This actually has some significant implications and can cause some issues later down the road. That is why you will want to stick around to hear the story we're going to share about the risk of online filing. But either way, you can probably see how splitting up your application may increase the risk for potential issues with your case. By keeping things together, you maintain one complete application that will get processed all together. And this leads me into the next advantage of paper filing, which is that you create an application packet optimized for the USCIS officer's experience. Up until recently, USCIS officers have only ever reviewed paper filings, and this means that the advantage of filing on paper is that you're giving the officer an application packet that they've already used to viewing and processing. By keeping things consistent with the officer's experience, you're reducing the likelihood for error. By contrast, filing Form I-130 online while the rest of your application is on paper can present an additional hurdle for the officer, so please just keep that in mind. The main point here is that by filing your I-130 on paper, you save the USCIS the time and effort to link your online I-130 with the rest of your application. Another important thing here is that very often couples erroneously assume that if they file Form I-130 online, it will be processed faster, which is not the case. Filing the form online does not speed up the government's review process. Ultimately, you should be evaluating your case holistically and preparing or having it prepared for you in a way best optimized for your success, and truthfully, every single immigration attorney would encourage you to file the entire case on paper. Finally, as promised, here are some real stories we've been hearing about from immigrant couples regarding their experience with online filing. And the last one is the most concerning, so definitely be sure to stick around because you will not want to file online after hearing what happened here. The first of the real-life online filing issues is that you may be required to file additional bona fide marriage evidence even after your I-130 gets approved. What happened in that case was this couple filed their I-130 online and waited for it to get approved. They made a very common mistake. They thought that I-130 was the only form they needed to file, so they didn't actually apply for a green card at the same time. Finally, after a long time had passed, they finally received the notice that their I-130 had been approved. When they didn't actually receive a green card with that approval, they realized that they were supposed to file a bunch of other forms. Shortly afterwards, they filed the rest of the required forms for a marriage adjustment. Despite getting their I-130 approved prior, the USCIS sent a request for evidence. What for, you're probably wondering? Well, the RFE was requesting additional bona fide marriage evidence. So how does it make sense that they would get a bona fide evidence RFE when filing Form I-485? Bizarre, right? I mean, they submitted all their bona fide marriage evidence with Form I-130 and got approved, so it doesn't really make sense that they would then get an RFE asking for more evidence. Here's the issue. The I-130 had been approved some time ago, and so the USCIS needed to verify that they were still in a legitimate relationship. So the couple needed to file a response to the RFE, and keep in mind, that means more attorney fees if working with a lawyer and an unnecessary waste of time. Or if you're handling this alone, it means double time wasted. First, because in this case, they sat and waited for the I-130 to be approved before filing the rest of their application, and then they had to respond to the RFE, which paused their case, and second, because now they needed legal assistance to address that RFE since it obviously threw them off. They didn't expect it, and that confused them, so they naturally just got scared and went ahead and hired a lawyer. Finally, here's the story that will really make you question whether you should file online. What happened was, this couple filed their Form I-130 online. Shortly afterwards, they filed everything else for their marriage green card on paper. After a ton of time waiting, the USCIS responded by rejecting their case. Ultimately, the USCIS stated that this couple couldn't file Form I-485 without the underlying petition of Form I-130. But wait, didn't I just tell you that they filed Form I-130 online? Here's the issue. The USCIS, for whatever reason, was not able to connect the dots between their online filed I-130 and their on-paper filed I-485, truly a USCIS error. But that's not the worst part, because technically they could just have refiled. The worst part is that this couple lost their filing fees because of this situation. The USCIS didn't keep their money, but for whatever reason, they weren't able to recover the fees they submitted through the money orders. This really put them on a negative loop and got them stuck for over a year without filing Form I-485. Keep in mind, There was also a child who had their separate applications, so the amount of money they lost for 2 applicants was considerable, and that's kind of what threw them off. The moral of the story, at the moment, filing for I-130 online when going through the marriage adjustment of status does not seem to be worth the risk. That's why we encourage the members of our program as well to continue filing on paper to avoid any unnecessary delays. But thank you for watching, give this video a like, and we will see you next week.